Hello, it's Sunday again, and today's tea time tale is a Scottish fairy tale. All my sources tell me it comes from Fife, but I'm sure it was told the lengths and breadths of Scotland as well. And I even found a French version and an Italian version. It has many names, but I call it Diamonds and Toads. There once was a king and a queen, and they each had a daughter. The king's daughter, oh, she was fair bonny, and she was well liked because she was good natured. She was always smiling, and she would do anything for anybody. But the queen's daughter, well, she could have been bonny if she hadn't been so grumpy, always frowning, and never had a good word to say to anybody. She wasn't well liked. Well, you see, the queen, she got jealous of the king's daughter. She realised that when it came to finding a husband, nobody was going to look at her daughter as long as the king's daughter was around. So she plotted and planned to get rid of the lassie. And one day she saw her chance. The king was awa on business. And so she says to the lassie, will you take this bottle and fill it up at the well at the world's end? Because I've heard the water there is so soft and it'll be really good for washing your faces. Well, of course, the lassie says, aye, I'll do that. And she took the bottle and off she went. Now, the queen was hoping that the lassie would get lost because the well at the world's end was quite far away. But the princess, she travelled on and further still, until eventually she came to a field that was full of sharp thorns and thistles and brambles. And she stood at its side and wondered how she was going to get across it without getting her feet hurt. And then she noticed, tied to the fence a wee bit further out, there was a wee pony. And the wee pony turned its head and looked at her. And because this is a fairy tale, it was able to speak. And it said, bonny lassie, untie me. For I've no been untied for here for 7 years and a day. Oh, of course I will, said the princess. And she untied the pony. And then the pony said, jump on my back and I'll take you across the field of thorns. And so she did. She climbed up on the pony's back and it rode across the field of thorns and set her down at the other side without a scratch on her feet. And on she went. And she walked far and further still until at last she came to the well at the world's end. But when she looked into the well, the water was away down at the bottom. She couldn't reach it. And she was just wondering what she was going to do now when up popped 3 heads, 3 bald heads, belonging to 3 wee old men. And the heads looked at her and they said, wash us, bonny lassie, and dry us with your clean linen apron. Okay, I can do that, said the princess. And so she carefully wiped the 3 heads and dried them with her linen apron. And when she'd done, one of the heads turned to the other twa and said, brother, what shall we wish for this bonny lassie? And the three-head says, Akim, let her be 10 times bonnier by the time she gets home. And then the second head said, brothers, what can I wish for this lassie? And they decided that every time she spoke, diamonds and precious stones would fall from her lips. And then the third head said, and what can I wish for this lassie? And they decided that every time she combed her hair, gold and silver would fall to the ground. Well, the three heads filled up the lassie's bottle, and on she went home, walking further and further and further still. And once again the pony took her across the field of thorns, and she walked further and further and further until at last she came home. But when the queen saw her, she was furious. Not only had she no got lost and managed to make her way back, she was now even bonnier than she'd been afore. And every time she opened her mouth to speak, diamonds and precious stones fell out. And every time she combed her hair, gold and silver fell to the ground. Well, when she heard the lassie's story, the queen says to her ain daughter, Doctor, take this bottle again and fill it at the well of the world's end. Well, the lassie wasn't pleased at all. She didn't want to go, but her mother told her she had to. So off she went, walking further and further and further still, until she too came to the field of thorns. And she didn't ken how she was going to get across it either. Then she spied the pony, and the pony spoke to her too, and said, Lassie, lassie, untie me, for I've no been untied for 7 years and a day. What? Said the lassie. Do you no ken who I am? I'm the queen's doctor. I didn't go about untying scabby ponies like you. And so the pony didn't take her across the field of thorns, and she had to walk, and when she got to the other side, her feet were all cut and bleeding. But still she went on, and she walked further and further and further still, until she too came to the well at the world's end. But she couldn't reach the water either. And as she was wondering what to do, up popped the three bald heads. And they looked at her and they said, Lassie, wash us. Wash us and dry us with your clean linen apron. What, she says, me, the queen's daughter, wash 3 scabby old heads like yours? No way, I'm no doing that. And so the 3 heads didn't fill her bottle up. But as she was getting ready to go, they spoke to each other, and the first head says, What shall we wish for this lassie? And they decided that by the time she got home, she would be even less bonny than she was now. And the second head decided that every time she opened her mouth to speak, toads and frogs should fall out to the ground. And the third head decided that every time she combed her hair, fleas and spiders and lice should fall out. Well, the lassie walked home, and it took her a long, long time. But eventually she got there, but she'd no water. And her mother was so angry because now, well, she was even less bonnier than she'd been afore. And every time she spoke, frogs and toads were falling out her mouth. And every time she combed her hair, fleas and spiders and lice were falling out on the ground. In fact, the queen was that ashamed of her daughter, she sent her off to another country to find somebody to marry. And so when a braw looking young laddie came along looking for a wife, he married the king's daughter. And that's the end of my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now.